Let's head down to San Francisco for a minute, where a commission just put forward the most bonkers town slavery reparations plan I've ever heard of. So the backstory here is that the local San Francisco government tasked a San Francisco African American Reparations Advisory Committee to analyze the idea of doing reparations for slavery and report back so they could consider the policy. Well, they're back, and their suggestions are a doozy. They're just pretty unhinged.
Yeah, I was digging through this morning. I had not heard about this at all, but it is quite a doozy. So basically, the committee is proposing the city make a lump sum payment of $5 million to Black residents who are at least 18 and who identify as Black or African American on public documents for at least 10 years. They also say residents must meet at least 2 of 8 other requirements. Among those is that the resident is personally or the direct descendant of someone incarcerated by the failed war on drugs, or is a descendant of someone enslaved through U.S. chattel slavery before 1865. The proposal...
That part's optional. The actually being descended from a slave is optional. It's one of the things you could have to qualify. And also being like a heroin dealer would qualify you. What?
Also, identify. It's not even that you actually are
Rachel Dolezal would get it.
You identify as Black on public documents. What? This is unhinged. And also, it proposes taxpayer-funded loan forgiveness and an income supplement of $98,000 a year for up to 250 years. When you talk about the math not mathing, what? With what money?
Yeah, exactly. So according to UC Berkeley, if every Black resident qualified for the $5 million payment, and not all would, but most would, especially if anyone could just identify. Though I guess you have to do it 10 years back. But the city would be on the hook for $223 billion. And I want to put that in context. The entire city's government budget right now is like $15 billion. And that would come out to a cost of $263,000 for every non-Black person in San Francisco. The funniest part of all of this is that slavery was never really that much of a thing in California. There was some slavery, but much less than in other parts of America, because from the very beginning that California was admitted to the Union, it was admitted as a free state. Now, there were some exceptions where slaves were brought from other parts of the country, and there was some, but it was much, much less than in the South and in other parts of the country. And they actually acknowledge in this plan that, yes, California never really had a recognized form of chattel slavery, but it did have segregation. And so hold on. Now we've totally shifted the goalposts, because they literally say you don't even have to be descended from a slave to qualify for $5 million cash. What?
But, come on. Reparations has always just been yet another end goal to communism. I'm sorry. It's bogus. I've always thought that. One, there is no real way, even if we are going based on, you have history of generations of your family being Black and it's documented, we have no ability to say whose descendants were slaves or who is the descendant of slaves, who isn't, because a lot of this wasn't documented. A lot of these people were not even on record, right? The personhood question is still up in the air for many of those decades where you had slavery. So just even being able to track who actually is a descendant of slaves, who actually was harmed in this way, was always bogus. Now you get into these kinds of parameters in California, and it's even crazier, but it's always made very little sense. It's always been something basically to just start trying to get a significant amount of the population basically on a universal basic income type situation, okay? It's never been a structured, here's a way we're going to track this and make sure that we just give some kind of actual reparation to people who were directly impacted by this, who had their property taken, and it's going to be this amount. No. There's no way to even quantify that or even understand. And I think if you were to go back and to have done this a long time ago, that might have been more realistic, more
I
attainable.
agree. I would have supported it after the end of the Civil War, do slavery reparations for former slaves. They deserve reparations for the harm that was done to them. You could even argue their children it should be done. But so many generations later, and you're going to punish people who were never slaves, reward people who were never slaves and punish people who were never slave owners, and also reward people who aren't descended from slaves and maybe their parents came over afterwards or their parents were free At the time, their, descendants or ancestors rather. It's just totally incoherent. What about mixed race people who are descended from both slaves and slave owners? The whole thing doesn't make any sense. It's just a bananas town progressive pipe dream.
And also, if you want to talk about going back and giving people reparations for harm the government caused to them, slavery is only one of many things the government has done to cause harm to many people in this country, right? Like, which ones do we say we go back and pay people for? People who were murdered by the government? People who had their property taken under eminent domain? Like, there's all kinds of ways the government has harmed people. You cannot possibly go back and make reparation for all that. What you could do is actually work to limit the government and prevent it from ever doing it again, which only comes from removing their power. But that's never what people who want reparations ever lean towards, right? It's not about actually preventing future harm. I don't think it's even about rectifying future harm. It's about more people being dependent on the government.
I think it's cashing in.
Yes.
I would be curious how many people on this commission would meet these qualification requirements for their $5 million that are very specifically written to be very open-ended.